Well, we first just want to start off by, what's happening latest with the Armed Service Committee. What have you guys been working on? What are your concerns?
Well, every year the Armed Services Committee passes a big defense bill that includes everything from how much we pay the troops to how many bullets and tanks and ships we buy to the policies governing the military. We're in the final stages of negotiating that bill this year. Senator McCain is chairman of the Senate Committee and I are just about done with that. So first rattle out of the box when we get back in September, hopefully we'll pass it, send it to the President.
So increased spending, or?
It will be, and that's a big issue. Defense spending has been cut about 21% when you count inflation over the last 4 years. We're trying to turn that around because the world is getting more dangerous, and we need to take care of our troops. We need to buy them the best equipment, and we need to make reforms to get more value out of the taxpayer money. So there's acquisition reform, there's cuts in overhead in this bill, so that more of the money we spend gets to the frontline troops who really need it.
So as far as this bill going forward, I mean, how is it looking against, Democrats versus Republicans?
Well, it's been pretty bipartisan. Really, the big bone of contention is that the President agrees with the amount of money we want to spend on defense, but he also wants to spend more money on other things like the EPA and the IRS. And he said he will veto the defense bill if we don't agree to spend more money on the other things. Now, I can't believe he would really do that. National security should be above political games, but we need to pass the bill, send it to him, and see what he does.
Speaking of national security, I know the Iran nuclear deal has been a big issue.
Yeah.
How are you guys standing on that? I know it's a lot of issues going on.
Well, it is. There's a lot of intense interest on that. The House and the Senate both have to vote on it by mid-September. More than half the House have co-sponsored a bill that would disapprove of the agreement that the President has reached. But then he can veto that. So the question is, what's the override vote on the veto going to be like? I think there's lots of skepticism about this deal by Republicans and Democrats. So we'll see how the votes come out, but I think a majority certainly disfavors the agreement.
What is your biggest concern with it?
I think there's three areas of concern. One is, will Iran really abide by it? Can you enforce it? Secondly, is it worth adding another 10 months to the time it takes Iran to build a nuclear bomb? Because if the agreement works perfectly, that's all it gets us, is another 10 months. And then a whole other area is, with all this money that Iran will get, they're going to admittedly cause more trouble, funding terrorism, provoking the Sunnis and further sectarian violence. So how are we going to deal with that? That's a whole other area that comes from this deal.
Now, kind of switching gears back to the defense spending. We have Bell Helicopter here, which employs a lot of people, and we've had some layoffs. If you do get that passed with more spending, do you think that will affect us locally with getting, being able to build more helicopters and have more jobs be made here?
Yeah, it'll definitely help. The other side is, if we are not able to get a defense bill passed, if we are not able to agree with the President on funding for next year, then defense spending will be cut. Now that will have an effect on both Bell and Pantex. So we need to avoid that at all costs, because not only is it not good for the workers here, it's not good for the troops that are risking their lives all around the world.
Well, let's kind of talk about your synthetic drug bill. We kind of ran something on it yesterday, but just to be kind of more clear about it, it's a big issue in Amarillo, K2 is. It
is a big issue. The reason I first became aware of this issue is because of what happened here in Amarillo. A young man from Amarillo died after taking some of this stuff. I talked to his mother. I talked to medical folks, law enforcement people here in town, and just realized what an epidemic it was. Unfortunately, now this epidemic has reached other parts of the country. It's been front page news in the Washington Post recently. And part of the problem is parents and kids especially don't realize how dangerous these poisons are. So they say, or they're called synthetic marijuana, and they have all of these fancy labels that kind of attract kids. The truth is, it is poison, and just one time of taking it can permanently damage or even kill somebody.
We've had a really big problem prosecuting people who sell it because they say it's not for human consumption.
Right.
However, with your new legislation, we'll be able to prosecute these people for selling it even with that label?
Yeah, it eliminates that legal loophole. That's what my bill does. Now, I think there are some other legal tools we're looking at to go after the people who sell this stuff. And the other major area we need to pursue is the mail. Because even if we can eliminate it in the sales here in town, it's too easy to get this stuff by mail, again, legally. And so I think a major area for me, after listening to folks here, is to focus the federal government on eliminating that legal loophole and also stopping it from the mails.
All right. It's so hard to track because they keep changing something to make it legal again.
Right.
They keep changing it.
Right. No, these people are very clever, trying to stay one step ahead of the law, but the best defense is for parents and kids to know to stay away from it. Whatever it's called, it is poison by another name, and one time can do devastating damage.
Yeah, that's awful. Let's see. So let's kind of talk about the GOP debate. There's a ton of Republicans. This is something I don't think we've ever seen before. What is your take on all, this unique Republican Party running for president right now?
Yeah. I don't know. I think it can be good and bad. It can be good to have all these people running for president if they're talking about how to solve problems that the country is facing, to be constructive and put forward ideas. If all they do is attack each other, it's not going to be helpful. It's going to actually hurt whoever the nominee is. So we'll see.
So what do you think is the most important quality for a presidential candidate for people to look for, in your opinion?
Well, one of the most important for me is who would be the best commander-in-chief. Because if you look at the duties of the president, protecting our national security as commander-in-chief is something nobody else can do, and it is just essential to have somebody who can have good advisors but is willing to take the tough decisions to protect this country. And if we don't have that, then we can lose our freedom, our lives, all sorts of things. So that is really basic. The other thing that's important that you don't hear much about, even a president has got to be able to work with other people. Because you can't get anything done if you don't work with Congress, if you don't work with governors, if you don't work with folks. So a key question for me in listening to these folks who are debating is, who is willing to roll up their sleeves and work with others to get things done rather than just give speeches to big crowds? Because that doesn't really accomplish very much. We need a president who's going to accomplish things, because he or she is going to have a big mess to deal with, whoever it is, when they take office.
Right. Well, another thing that's kind of been happening in our nation, I know that you've been vocal about, is sanctuary cities. And I know that's kind of a big deal for us here too, being Texas.
Yeah.
Kind of just talk to us about your take on that and why you think that they should be done away with.
Well, really there's two reasons. One is it is not good for the country to have these cities where people can violate our laws but then go to and get a free ride. So it attracts people who may be in the country for the wrong reason, and that's not good. Secondly, it's not good because no city, no individual should be above the law. The law is the law for everybody, and one of the strengths of our country is each man and woman is seen equally under the law. That means the law has to be applied equally, whether you're the president or whether you're an individual. And so to have cities that say, we're not going to apply the law because we don't agree with it, undermines this rule of law that is so fundamental to our society.
Right. Well, there's something else I wanted to talk to you about too, kind of sort of goes along with this, but it's not, we're not going to air this tonight. There's recently something going on that is halting refugees resettlement. You may not know a lot about that, but I'm aware that you do know a lot about, the refugees in our area.
Sure.
And I've spoken to a couple of people who are saying, refugees actually help us economically here because they're employed at the meatpacking industry. Can you kind of speak on behalf of, the refugee situation we have in Amarillo?
Well, I think it's a huge source of pride that since the end of the Vietnam War, refugees have come to the Panhandle region, have found jobs, have assimilated into our communities, and contributed to our economy, to our societies, and our way of life. The challenge is recently we have been overloaded. We have been getting more refugees than we could handle. And whether you look at the schools, the health care, the jobs, the law enforcement, it's just been too much. So we've been in touch with the refugee agencies as well as the State Department and all the local community leaders to try to have a better way forward, to slow it down. And to have some common sense applied here. I don't think anybody much says we don't want any refugees, but you know, by some measures, we have as many or more refugees in recent years come to Amarillo than any other city, certainly in Texas, and I've heard even in the country. So we want to be smart about it, and that's what we're trying to regulate.
So it'd be more of like a get more cities, and if we're just talking about Texas, that are more served like Amarillo does, to spread it out?
Yeah, it needs to be spread out. Here's the other thing. So once you get a certain number of refugees from a particular country, then it naturally attracts others in the United States who want to come here, who may be related or may be from the same area or the same country. So there is this secondary migration that happens that's not where people first settle, but they are, once you're here, you're free to move around the country. And that is also part of what overwhelms the local schools, the local health care, the local law enforcement, and the services that have to be provided to people. So that has to be taken into account as the State Department and these refugee agencies decide where to put new people. You have to take into account the secondary migration that also adds to what a community has to face. And really that has not been taken into account before now. We're trying to help kind of open some eyes and take a little broader view of this so it can be the best decision not only for our community but for the people involved. If a refugee comes to Amarillo and we are not able to deal with them because we're overwhelmed, then that's not in their best interest either.